Good Monday evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining me on the Nobody Asked Me Guys show. Guys, listen, this is not a commentary, but maybe it is a commentary, but I wanted to just share some things with you as we talk about the 2020 census. And the reason I want to share those things, and it'll take me a few minutes, the reason I want to share those things is because I know that I'm not the only one that can think. So please, I do not mean to insult anyone, but I often wonder when we just accept everything that's passed our way, the census and all of that, and we talk about sensitivity, and we still dealing with human rights and voter registration and those kinds of things. The hatred, the racism, the finger pointing, that kind of thing. I challenge all of us to have an intelligent conversation or to have many intelligent conversations, not arguments. We are so ready to have arguments and, well, I didn't do this and I didn't say this and you can't tell me what to say, that is never my issue. It's never my point of trying to censor anyone. However, my point and my issues are, I start with myself, is let's look at the factors and the things that affect us. So when I look at the factors, for me, I can only speak for Melvin Lars. And let me say that again. I can only speak for Melvin Lars. And so as we talk on the Nobody Asked Me Guys show, I said, if you can see here, I have a 2020 census. It says 2020 Census Questions, Part 1 and 2, the Nobody Asked Me Guy. So listen, take a little census with me. Why did I put together this census? Because I wanted us to address again the hatred, the racism, the finger pointing, the always trying to associate negativity with people of heavy melanation. And so we do it so often, we're not even conscious of it. Yeah, we do. Now, we may not want to admit it. We may want to get angry because it's brought to our attention, but we do it so often, we're not even conscious of it. So let's look quickly into this. Let's have the conversation. Now, I want all of us to think about your port, and I do say port of entry. Did you enter that your ancestors entered through Ellis Island, or did they come to, quote, other ports of call? And if they did, what was their reception? Were they accepted with open arms? Were they readily given the opportunity to make a move, a positive move in what we call the United States? So we have to do a census, I think, and this is my opinion, but if we're going to have an intelligent conversation, to even set the platform to have an intelligent conversation, we just can't start in talking about colonization and slavery and what was happening in other countries and what was not. Because obviously, if those countries had not been invaded, if other peoples had not been in those countries, then they wouldn't know, or they wouldn't be able to tell their versions or distort history. My number one question starts: what was your ancestors' ports of call prior to entering America? Now, we all should think about that. We all should think about that. If our ancestors had it going on, why were they coming to America? We talk about immigrants and leave the country if you're not happy and this, that, and the third. We've all read history where criminals were put on ships that were overflowing to get them out of England and other places. Did they come to America? History says and suggests that they did. So let's start there with life. History also tells us that America was discovered in 1292 by Africans. Yeah, that's documented history. Now, there's a piece of history that talks about Columbus discovered America in 1492. But what's always overlooked is that there was a Moor that was the navigator. Now, we all know that the navigator is the person that shows us where we're going, reads the maps, that kind of thing. It was a Moor. And we know that a Moor is our modern word for black. Okay, let's just move there. Secondly, did they voluntarily travel to these American shores without being coerced? They being your ancestors, my ancestors, whomever. Did they voluntarily travel to these American shores without being coerced? Now, let's be careful when we're doing this census, because I hope that you guys inbox me that I can send you a copy of these. We're not talking about what you are feeling emotionally. We're not talking about whether or not you want to discuss it. We're simply talking about, are you willing to have a conversation and to answer the questions honestly? Let's look at the third one. What was their net worth prior to their exit to America? Think about that. Now, obviously, you may not know that, but then if things come down, trickle down, you may. However, I want you to think about that. What was their net worth before coming to America? Were they gainfully employed? And if so, what was their occupation? Think about that. Remember, we're going to have a conversation. We're not having an argument. This is the 2020 Census Questions, Part 1 and 2, formulated by the Nobody Asked Me guy. Let's look at the fifth one here. Did they own at least 5 acres of land and or real estate where they presently were? Think about it. Okay, I'm going somewhere with this. It's leading up to what we need to discuss. Did they receive a livable, sustainable, and or substantial, inheritance prior to their departure? We've all heard the stories. My great great grandfather came here with just the clothes on his back, or only had a nickel or a dime in there, etc. So, I mean, we have to look at these things, all right? 6, did they receive a livable? We talked about that. I'm sorry. Uh, 7, were they professionally educated? Were they professionally educated? Now, these questions are imperative because when we get to part 2, then you're going to understand why I'm asking these questions within the realm of a conversation that I hope we can have. What was their net worth upon their departure? We talked about that. That's a double question, because when I talk about education, then we know that depending on a person's academic status, even in what we like to call the olden days, it spoke depending on the region they lived, et cetera, it would address their net worth. Were they married and with children? We know those things very much have to be discussed as to departing a place, remaining in a place, taking care of families, having to plan, etc. So we can't just ignore things and pretend like they don't factor in 2020, because they do. Were they involved in the criminal justice system prior to coming to America? We are notorious for vilifying people and calling people criminals and talking about immigrants and all that. I alluded earlier. Look at the history, how people were shipped. Your criminals were shipped to these American shores and other places to get them out of England and some other countries. So let's see, in order to have a conversation, see, with all this hatred and finger pointing and all of that kind of stuff, we need to have a real conversation. Were they a part of the judiciary process? We need to discuss that as well prior to getting to part 2. Because all of this is the foundation. Now, we've all been taught that without a foundation, you can't build. So if we're going to discuss things honestly in these United States, we have to talk about the foundation. And we can't just start with, well, people can get an education. Okay, let me say again. documented information, even if you believe or not that Columbus discovered America in 1492. You do the math. People feel that they are superior because they have less melanation in their skins. That reason alone, they are more intellectual, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. 1492, you do the math, to 2020. Now, are you beginning to see why part one was so important? Because we don't want to have real conversations, and we talk about minorities. There's always want something, or people want entitlements. 1492. Your ancestors have been in this country, and we know we talk about when slavery began and how long it lasted, but we still blame other people. Okay, let's some of us have had a 2,000-year head start, 500-year head start, etc. But you're still wallowing around, blaming other people that do not look like you because you're not part of the 1% or the 3% or the 5% or the 10% or whatever percentage you might want to hang your hat on. You're still migrants, brown people, yellow people, what we have deemed the Native American, the red man, everybody. People continue, or the power structure to continue to try to blame everybody else, when in fact, we all know that this great United States was built by slave labor. We all know it's stained with blood. We all know that some of the immigrants that came through Ellis Island, etc., did not embrace enslaving other people, etc. So we have to get these questions and have this conversation so that we can move on and get away from all of this hatred and craziness. Because guess what? What's the name of this show? Nobody asked you a thing. Let's look at part two for a moment. Does your family legacy include less than 3 generations of military participation? You know, we talk about being patriots and fighting for this country and honoring this country and all of that. But you felt it important enough to vote for someone who goes back 5 generations and never, according to history, you know, disenfranchised people don't get to write history. So, according to history, you have a gentleman sitting in the White House, 5 generations, never served in the military. What, 4 or 5 children now? None never served in the military. He never served in the military, but he's a patriot. And all of these people are such patriots for the country. Have I? Of course. Young one's in right now. Did I personally serve in the military? No, I did not. My granddaddy, my dad, my stepdad, uncles, aunts, nieces, nephews are retired military personnel. Little cousins are in the military right now. Yes. So let me just get that straight. What family legacy have you inherited that was brought to these American shores? When you arrived on these shores, and now you're in this generation, what did you inherit? Did your ancestors bring a legacy with them of being patriots, of being millionaires, multimillionaires? All of these things have to be discussed so we can get through all of this hatred and this craziness. What is your current net worth? Now, obviously, you don't want, I'm going to tell people your personal business, and no one is asking for that. But these things are for you to think. I put this census together because I tell people all the time, when I'm talking to you, I'm talking to me. So these are questions that I would ask myself because we're also quick to place the blame, point fingers, make excuses, tell other people what they should and should not do. Well, if I can make it, you can make it. We have all of those things to say to people without doing any research at all. When I was a young man, they used to call it just flapping your gums, but my grandmother would call it chin music. Did your net worth come from your family inheritance? See, that is another thing we don't want to discuss. We can easily talk about who can do what, who should do what. If you were fortunate enough to get a professional education, could you walk in college and walk out debt free? Did you have to pay back student loans and take menial jobs and work 2 or 3 jobs to make up one job? All of that. Did you even have an educational background with your family tree? 1 generation, 2 generations, 3 generations. People that really understood. See, it's one thing to say, get an education. There's another thing to really understand and know the power of having an education and then how to use that. So these are just some points that we want to cover in our census. What level of professional education do you currently hold? And how does that impact your present standing? What is your occupation? Is it family business? Is it a business you started? Or are you working for someone else? See, all of these things are relative to the conversations that we have every day, talking about people living off the government, people wanting entitlement. You know, there's so much chin music about this. And the very people that are saying these things are living off of the government. All of these politicians are being paid, the senators, congresspersons, presidents, etc., all receive checks from the taxes and things that we pay. So, what are they talking about? Entitlements. Have the best insurance, get to travel. I mean, hey, I don't even want to go through all of that because we need to have a real conversation. We need to dispense with all of this crazy hatred and racism and finger pointing because we've all been played against one another. Because many of you that are less melanated than I am are just as broke, if not broker, than I am, etc. So that's another conversation as well. And we understand that life has not always been easy. We understand that. And I tell people all the time, they go, life is a bed of roses. No, a bed of roses, unless you've genetically altered those roses, they have thorns and very thick thorns. So even though there's a beautiful fragrance emanating from the rose, it can also bring much pain. Do you own a home and are at least 5 acres of land that was not inherited? These are questions you need to ask yourselves when you start trying to make decisions about other people, why they're broke, why they're hungry, why they're uneducated. There are a lot of things that should be discussed by individuals. No one is saying make excuses for anyone, but what we are talking about on this particular, Dr. Tachi, great to see you. Please hop in and join me. I'm just kind of doing a commentary, but it's not a commentary. And I want to talk about the census that I put together. And I'm just getting on part 2 with owning land and inheriting, whether or not the family inherited the land, whether they purchased it. Did they own at least 5 acres? And note, guys, my question was own 5 acres. I didn't say if you were paying on 5 acres, if you had recently purchased 5 acres and you're still paying on it, or if the home that you're living in, you're still paying on the mortgage. See, these are things that we refuse to talk about when we point fingers at people, call people lazy and shiftless and all of this kind of stuff. We don't want to address those things, which brings me to my next question. Do you have health and life insurance? Do your job, or that you pay for privately? These are questions we need to ask ourselves before we start pointing fingers. So with the census, with the Nobody Asking Me guy census, we're going to have conversations. And I keep asking you guys all of the time, let's have a conversation. We must dispense with the hatred and the racism and the craziness. Now, let me ask you this. If you were to miss at least 120 consecutive days of income without the ability to recover it within the next 120 days, would you be financially wiped out and are homeless? And or would you have to rely on government assistance even if it was temporary? See, we have to think about these things because we in America are so quick to tear people down and talk about, oh, this is the land of plenty. But we won't have a conversation. A land of plenty for whom? You know, we asked this in earlier questions: inheritances, educational status, being the first in the family, second in the family, etc. Having one job that can take care of you as opposed to having to have two or three to make up for. See, all of these things come into play. Do I live in a state that have unions? Do I live in a state that's a right to work state? Am I an at will employee? You can fire me anytime you get ready. Thus, I'm given jobs and forced to take jobs because, yeah, people like to eat and they have families to feed. So we don't want to have real discussions. We just point fingers at people and talk about how lazy they are and how shiftless they are and all of that kind of thing. And where they don't want to get an education and you can get free education this day, etc. We all have to open our eyes and understand that Joe, hey, great to hear, George and Dave. Hey, you guys feel free to jump in. I'm just doing kind of a commentary because I put together a 2020 census because I don't know about you guys, but I'm just sick and tired of all this hatred and racism and craziness that's going on. No one wants to talk to anyone. We all just want to hang our hats on something and then call it be the facts. Now, can you currently or have you ever been in a financial position to afford to send your children to a private school without being financially challenged or stressed? See, it's easy to talk about what other people should do. Remember, guys, I tell people all of the time, when I'm talking to you, I'm talking to me. So it's easy to tell other people what they should do, what your recommendations are. But think about your situation. Are any of your household members formally or currently a part of the judiciary process? See, we have to address these issues. Just like we talked about in part one, we have to address these issues. Which port did your ancestors come through? Did they come with a lot of inheritance? Again, I'll repeat. Well, it all came with $1. They have $5. Or they pull themselves up by their bootstrap. We say all of those things. But do we really have real discussions? Because we all know, even during those times, you couldn't buy anything with $1. You couldn't buy anything with $5. You couldn't buy anything with $20. Not to take care of you and your family. You couldn't build a house. You could get possibly because the government was giving away land and stuff like that. See, these are things that people don't want to discuss. They just want to continue to hate and to be angry with other people instead of understanding that it's really simple. I take you back to one simple point. Many people accept Columbus discovered America in 1492. So, if you believe that, and since in America we try to fast forward to slavery, and we talk about August 4th, 1619, you do the math. You do the math. 1492 to 16. Wow. What head start? What head start? Then let's say we get to 1619. And then we don't abolish slavery until 400 years later, official slavery. Then once we do that, then we put all kind of laws in place. So until we have a real conversation, you're going to continue to have this divide. And I encourage you guys. See, I want you to inbox me. I want you to come on the platform and let's talk. And I don't do arguments. Let me be clear. I do not do arguments. We do conversations. You know, we all have to research. And I'll repeat myself, guys. Disenfranchised people, poor people, etc. We did not write the history. That was done by the people in power. So if all of these things are mentioned that might make you cringe, or that might make you uncomfortable, etc., it wasn't written by those individuals that were mostly affected. Which always brings about part of my argument to say, if they took the liberty to write that, imagine what was not written. The atrocities that happened to people, all the ugliness and I tell people, last thing I want to say about watch the Westerns. I laugh every time I watch. I love watching Westerns. You always got this big cattle baron, and he hired all these gunfighters to come in and run other people off their property, and all this kind of stuff. Take water holes, won't share the water with people. I mean, come on, guys. You know, we're 2020, and people, especially black people, are still asking, can we vote? You have to have a voter registration, a civil rights movement, and all that stuff. It's 2020. 2020. People are still arguing about Barack Obama being president. Black people are, well, he didn't do for black people what he could have. Then we have 45, who the man admits that he, okay, guys. So we won't have conversations. We refuse to have conversations. Then we all say, oh, I'm a Christian. I believe in God. And we skip over the very first thing that it says. God made man in his own image. And then we skip over, he has no respecter of person. We love to skip right on past those. Because, guys, guess what? If we did not skip past those, then we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now. If we really believed what we say we believe when it comes to making decisions, it's okay. And I tell people, and I'm glad you guys are here, so please allow me to say to you, as a former star athlete myself, you cheer for me on Saturdays, but on Mondays, when you see me walking across campus, if I'm not at a predominantly black college, you won't even speak. You see me walk in the classroom, you won't even acknowledge. That happens all over the country, more times than people want to admit. When I'm competitive academically, it's not because I studied just as you did. It's because the professors gave me a grade. So it's just so many things that are hanging out there that we do not discuss and we will not openly discuss. So I encourage each and every one of us to start conversations, not arguments. No, start conversations. Do some research. Have some facts. Know what happens. Know what transpires. Because right now, you have over 500,000 people that in Louisiana that don't have insurance, and people are mad about Obamacare. But all of the politicians that's fighting against Obamacare have top flight insurance that they do not pay a dime for. Who's the hypocrite? Who's receiving entitlements? Who votes themselves a raise all of the time because they can't live on $300,000 a year? They can't live on 174. Where are the hypocrites? But see, that's what I say, because people refuse to have conversations. It doesn't just affect people that look like me. It affects people that look just like them. But they've brainwashed these people to think that they're on the same page, when really, guys, you're not. You're not even close. You're not even in the same neighborhood. Think about it. Think right now, right this very moment. How much land do you own? What's your 401k? What businesses do you own? Are they salvageable? All of those things. Do you have best insurance for your family? Can you send your kids to special schools where you are reasonably assured that they will be appropriately educated and you can afford that without being in a strain? See, these are questions that we don't want to talk about. Or we talk about welfare moms and all of that. When you build governmental housing and men can't live, only the moms with children can live there. So you purposely run the men off. So we create a lot of single parent homes, but we don't want to discuss that. We just kind of poo poo that. Or when you put people of color in jail for jaywalking, but you have, quote, you've even, you in this country, we've even categorized our crime: white collar crime, blue collar. Come on, guys. That's why I laugh all the time about that. We categorize our crime. It's a crime. We pay large fines, those of us that can afford it. We never see jail, or we see it as only a short time. Unless, to be honest, people try to cite OJ. Yeah, I'll be the first to say that a lot of people were shocked that OJ got to walk. And they cheered because they could not believe that because of his melanation, he got to walk. So OJ withstanding, cite other incidences for me in this great country where people have been even thought to be or not guilty. But man just got executed the other day who it was proven he wasn't. So that's all I'm saying, is that until we have real conversations, then people that are less melanated won't keep asking, what do you people want? Or, well, you can go to school with us. I mean, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but nobody's excited about going to school with less melanated people. We want educations. And that's one thing too. I get on black politicians about all the time. Integration had nothing to do with black people. And I don't know why black politicians won't step up and talk about that. Integration had to do with athletes. The whole fight was about separate but equal, getting the same amount of money funneled into, quote, all black schools that were going into, quote, all white schools, unquote, for the both of them, getting appropriate textbooks and I'm in that era where we would get textbooks from our, quote, white school, unquote, where all the space where you put your name was already filled in, pages were missing, etc. Yes, I'm in that era. So that's what the fight was about. It was never, ever about integrating schools. But again, the individuals that make the decisions and the powers that be, because the, quote, black athlete was supposed to be superior. They want the national championships and all of that some of the more progressive schools were having because they had tons of black athletes. That's what make people tell you the truth. Integration came about, especially in the South, because of athletes. Make them tell you the truth. We have been bamboozled. A guy I saw a guy, guys, I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna get off. I saw a guy in my native Louisiana last week before last, had this big Trump sign on the back of his truck. Mind you, it's his truck. But it was a Toyota and it was all dinged up. But he had, I'm going, this is sad. I'm serious. I don't mean to laugh. I'm going, this is really, really, really sad. You're driving a Toyota in a beat up truck and you got Trump plastered all across the back. And you are being more affected or just as affected by the policies that the senators are putting in place than I am. So, guys, we've got to quit being suckered just because we are less melanated or we are more melanated. That's really what this whole process is all about, in my opinion. That's why I want to do this census, because it's about classism. And until people get that, because see, as a former educator, I've worked in your blue ribbon schools, I've worked in your ghetto schools, I've taught attorneys' children, doctors' children, etc. I've also taught the welfare moms' kids. In 37 years of education, I have never, ever had any parent to come to my office or to my classroom when I was a classroom teacher or as an assistant principal or a principal and tell me or to even indicate that they did not want their child to be successful academically and in life. 37 years. Never. And dare I say, without patting myself on the back, I've been very blessed. I've been principal of 3 schools that people thought were not going to survive. That was why they hired me. So when you read stories about Joe Clark and all of that, I was blessed to have worked for Dr. George McKenna, who the George McKenna story was made in 1986. I was tutored by him, worked as his head football coach and instructor. And I was blessed to learn from that tutelage and turn 3 schools around myself, along with, first of all, the blessings from God, teachers that wanted to make a difference, students that wanted to make a difference, parents that wanted to make a difference, a community that wanted to make a difference. That's all. People have to be motivated. They have to know that hope is real and it's not just a conversation. And they have to know that individuals are honest and true about actually helping them to succeed. So, if you'd like a copy of my US Census, please inbox me and I'll be more than happy to share a copy because I want to have a conversation. I want to have this conversation, guys. So, listen, thank you for joining me. And please feel free to grab a camera before we get off if you want to talk directly. But again, I want to thank Dave and Dr. Tachi, Coach Dave, I'm sorry, and Dr. Tachi for coming and sharing with us. Now, if you want to contact me, guys, several streams, www.dyingonmyfeet.com or 440-935-0374 or the Nobody Asked Me Guy Show at gmail.com, all lowercase. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for being with me. I appreciate your presence. Have a great and blessed night. Hopefully, we will see one another again and we will have this conversation.